Excellent, excellent. So what we have here is a Crypto Coffee Club workshop, and we have a very special guest here. Her name is Catrina Sheridan, out of Dublin, Ireland, I believe, and she's a CEO of a very, very interesting company. She will go into the details of exactly what the company does and what her vision is. But I wanted to say with this workshop is to really delve deep into the human experience of technology, and the force, how technology can really impact individuals in I would say developing areas of the part of the world, entrepreneurs who are looking to really take ownership of their finances and their life through entrepreneurship, but using technology as a way to enable them in a greater way. So what we're going to do, we're going to dig deep into some areas regarding the blockchain technology and how that's going to be used. But what I'm really interested in is Katrina's viewpoint on exactly her vision, what she's looking to do to enable that vision to flourish. And we'll talk about some maybe a little bit of technical stuff, but the main thing is the human experience with blockchain technology. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Katrina, and if you could go and just tell everyone about yourself, your company, and your background.
Sure. Hi, Christopher. Just delighted to be here on Crypto Coffee. Delighted that you're kind of having these kind of long sessions really to talk and unpack some of these things. So, just feel very thankful and grateful to be on your show. So, I suppose just a little bit about myself. So I'm a country girl. I grew up on a farm in Cavan in Ireland, and was lucky enough actually once I finished college to be a migrant. So at the time when I finished college, there was 15% unemployment here in Ireland. And so many of us, you took the boat to the UK or you took the plane. And I was really lucky to get a visa when I was in college and started my career in the States and got to work with amazing organizations. So my first organization was Macy's, where I worked in their buying offices. So they say there's a big focus around customer delivery and the customer experience. But the other thing is, they say like retail is details. So around, really kind of that kind of commercial attention to kind of margin management, stock management, moving goods through customer trends and all of that. So it was a fantastic underpinning to, I suppose, commercial business. And then from there, I went into, I worked for Ipsos Research, and that was fantastic because Ipsos Research, for listeners, it's a big research company, one of the biggest research companies in the world. And I worked in the North American organization at that time. And my first job was really all about looking at segmentation of customers in the retail sector. So the Macy's, the Bloomingdale's, the Saks of this world. So it was kind of a continuation on from my retail experience. But a lot of it was the methodologies that was used was all about, looking at kind of preferences, customer behavior, and all of those things. So worked with some amazing data scientists where we did cluster analysis, conjoint analysis, like everyone talks about big data as, the new oil. Well, back then, we were dealing with big data, and I was there at a time where the whole process was being digitized, where you were going from paper and pen to, recording this on technology. So research and big data has been kind of a part of my life for a long time. And one of my clients was an organization called CPC International, which is now part of Unilever Best Foods. So again, following my time in Market Facts, I moved over to the big manufacturing kind of traditional brand management area, where I was marketing manager. And again, like the experience there was, we were in manufacturing, so it was kind of lean management principles. It was again about the use of food technology to deliver something. One of, the key memorable people I worked with there was a guy called Howard Moskowitz. He was kind of the guy. Malcolm Gladwell actually did a TED talk on him, where he was the kind of inventor of customer segmentation and realizing that people have different preferences. So his ideas, I think he was consulting with Kraft at the time, is, you don't need to make just one red tomato sauce, that actually there are tons of different red tomato sauces that some like them with bacon, some like them with, more kind of chili, that kind of stuff. So that's where I suppose customer segmentation was founded. And I also kind of got my first exposure to developing a website. I had no clue what I was doing. And what we did was we kind of created this kind of information superhighway of sending Hellmann's recipes to people. So it was really interesting. The big global HQ, in North America, everything's very suited and booted, and I was kind of bringing in these guys with like torn jeans and beards, and we're saying, we're going to put Hellmann's mayonnaise recipes on the information superhighway. So like, I suppose I'm kind of sharing those because, like, at the end of the day, having, I suppose, been someone who's older and more mature within the technology, and just kind of seeing the evolution of it, and just kind of experimenting in those early 90s with the internet, it's kind of been amazing to see the evolution of it, and just kind of reflecting on that as part of that. And then I moved with Unilever to the UK. I thought I was missing the Celtic tiger in Ireland at the time, and myself and my then boyfriend, now husband, we kind of wanted to, put down tracks in Ireland. And interestingly, what's been really great is, Ireland has gone through this technology boom. Has been a really great economic success story. So kind of I left because of lack of economic opportunity, but then I came back because of the economic opportunity of Ireland, where, we've been really successful in many different spheres, but particularly in the technology sphere, in attracting, large multinationals to have a presence, a European and EMEA presence here in Ireland. So I moved to the technology sector because I was really excited about it. And I moved to British Telecom. And interestingly, what I was bringing to value there was that kind of customer-centric approach, the fact that customer segmentation, so that was kind of your value add. Meanwhile, I was kind of really learning a huge amount around, the role of technology, the optimization of networks, the importance of technology to really enable businesses around the world, to enable governments, to enable citizens, and all of those things. And then from there, I worked in Dotmobi, which was a really interesting organization. So it was an entity which brought together the world of the internet and mainly telecoms and the payments world together to realize, I suppose, the opportunity of mobile web. So there was Google, there was Microsoft were involved, Visa were involved, and then the big telecoms players like Vodafone, like Telefonica at the time, Wind Mobile, and then some other ecosystems players from the whole internet area as well. So our job there was kind of to create tools and services into the SME sector, which kind of enable the adoption of mobile internet, but also be an advocate and showcase how mobile was enabling people. And actually, one of the examples I always use was in South Africa, where there was kind of a wholesale bakery, and every day the wholesaler would go out to the market and sell his bakery goods, but he would end up getting robbed on the way back.
Oh,
but
wow.
as a result of, I suppose, the innovation in Africa around the movement of money using mobile phones, they ended up being able to, use tech services to kind of transfer the money, and he was able to do his business in a safe way. So I suppose that for me, looking at the top of your introduction there, Christopher, it kind of shows around the kind of human impacts and outcomes of technology in a very simple way. So from there, then I did a management buy-in where into a VoIP company. So, realizing the benefits of internet to do telecommunications, video conferences, and developing a unified service. And again, there it was about, how could we provide a big phone service to an SME? So, one of the favorite anecdotes I tell of the story, there was this woman sitting in Kerry who was, developing kind of Irish food baskets. But through, I suppose, Blue Face's technology at the time, she was able to have a US number, and she was able to kind of really grow our kind of market and global presence of our organization. So again, it's how the power of technology can enable SME and micro businesses and all of those things. And then from there, I took an interesting segue through a volunteer experience. So I ended up on the board of a Russian charity, which was all about transforming the lives of orphans in Russia. And my heart was completely taken. So I went on a field visit and I thought, oh my God, it's kind of amazing what people do. And so I spent the last 13 years in the charitable sector. So, and spending quite a lot of time in the back of jeeps in Africa, just kind of spending time with people at a really grassroots level to understand their needs, how you deliver solutions, what are the voices of kind of African people in terms of realizing their potential as such. So it's kind of been an interesting background, always exciting, and just kind of really feel privileged to have learned from these really big organizations. And, I suppose Nafasi is kind of a manifestation of, all of those experiences, which is about supporting young entrepreneurs. So, I mean, to the listeners, it's an incredible, they say demographics is destiny, but to think that the working population of Africa will surpass the working population of India and China combined by 2050 is just an amazing fact that, very much is kind of shocking in a way to me, that, oh my God, there is all this opportunity in Africa, and yet we have huge underemployment in Africa. So many people work within informal job settings, and I suppose Nafasi is there to say, well, part of the underpinning of any socioeconomic development is having a really robust base of Indigenous SMEs. And we know from all of the World Bank reports, OECD reports, that, SMEs in the main constitute about 90% of businesses in the world. And they also constitute in the region anywhere between 50 to 70% of employment. And that employment, for one person employed within an SME, they provide then, 5 kind of opportunities at a community level, kind of shops, cafes, whatever else. So getting the socioeconomic development of SMEs and having that to be robust and healthy and forward-facing, I think, is really important to any economy. But it is extremely important to Africa, and that's where Nafasi came about. So I'll stop there, just if you want to, and we can talk more about Nafasi.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting journey, Katrina, and I think we're around a similar age. So that actually disclosing our age, and I experienced the '90s, the boom, the development of the web, the superhighway they were calling it at the time, which is Web 1.0, and just getting an email address was a big thing, and getting dial-up internet. Now, when we obviously moved to Web 2.0, with social media, multimedia, unified messaging, all those things were a very big, even the dot-com boom and bust in the late 90s, early 2000s, really, the companies that had real propositions for the market came through and really increased in value. And I think a lot of it, we're seeing it now with Web 3.0, which is blockchain technology, and how we're taking it to the next level in a big way. And it's a fourth industrial revolution, really, I believe, for people to really pay attention to. But what I wanted to do was to really go into how Nafasi are really how that got started, and some of the challenges you had in the sense of bringing it to people's attention in Ireland, and as well as what is the main vision to help entrepreneurs, especially in East Africa as well.
Yeah. So I suppose Nafasi came about, well, first of all, just I do quite a lot of mentoring with startups. So I'm part of the Enterprise Ireland Mentor Programme, which is a programme here in Ireland which supports entrepreneurs and SMEs with capital and mentoring and advice and creating networks, to realise their potential. And I'm also part of a Stanford business school, which does that into Africa as well. So it's kind of a passion for me. I always love being around entrepreneurs, and just their kind of joie de vivre. Like, at the end of the day, an entrepreneur wants to fix stuff. They want to do stuff. They see a better way of doing things. And, my time kind of, walking around Africa, whatever else, I was kind of always interested to talk to people about, okay, how did you get this job within the NGO world? Like, tell me about your family. And, the interesting thing I heard in Africa, in some countries, what was really interesting, so my co-worker would say to me, well, actually, my child in Africa, they're getting educated outside of Africa, or they're leaving Africa. They want to leave Africa because they're possibly not going to have as good a life as I've had. And I thought, oh my God, that's like a huge kind of issue. And the other thing, again, sitting in the back of taxis, was kind of coming across all these young people that had business degrees, accountants degrees, and they're driving taxis. Or, when you talk to entrepreneurs, they're moonlighting. They've got not just one job, they've got 2 or 3 jobs to kind of keep the food on the table or whatever else. So I thought, wow, if we could create a system whereby we supported entrepreneurs with working capital and actually realizing the true journey of the entrepreneur, like really looking at that kind of outcomes and outputs. This is kind of like the researcher in me, to have policy based on evidence base, on the real human experience of entrepreneurship. Wouldn't that be, a great thing to come about? So Nafasi is a Swahili name. Nairobi was kind of my first port of call. I feel it's a country that's looking to, realize the potential of ICT. It's kind of part of their their kind of strategy. It's a really great, buzzy city, amazing entrepreneurs I've met there. And in Swahili, Nafasi means space, opportunity, and chance. So back to the demographic of, the working population of Africa, like it's in everyone's interest that there isn't unemployment and underemployment in Africa. When we look at the kind of macro context of climate change, of urban and the resulting urbanization and all of those things, it's really important that we kind of create that kind of thriving indigenous economy, and actually that there isn't a tech colonization of Africa, that Africa gets to realize and stand on its own feet. So, so that's where the thought process behind Nafasi was to provide working capital, and in return for that working capital, the entrepreneur would share the real kind of outputs, outcomes, and the use of funds. And the idea there is that they would have what we would develop like a global venturing passport. So as part of that, we would give them tokens. So non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, is an instrument within blockchain. And that would almost be used almost like as a credibility token, and a venturing passport of the entrepreneur to show how they've used the money, and also share with us the outcomes and outputs of that. And the thought process was that that venturing passport would then be used as a tool to go after more formal other parts of financing. So if they wanted to bring in equity, if they wanted to bring in, take in banking loans, at least there was kind of some record there. Because, today, the M-Pesa, which is very popular in Africa, again, banking systems often look at the credit history and the behavior on the M-Pesa platform to then understand around kind of credit worthiness for loans, et cetera, et cetera. Then the idea was on the supply side. So again, you and I today, many of us give to charities today, and crowdfunding has been a great innovation in terms of, making it more efficient and effective, because suddenly you're using digital and you don't have to use other costly ways of fundraising. But the idea was to, again, give attribution for the giving. And I think, if Edelman is a company that has been measuring trust, and they measure trust in media, in business, in government, and they also measure it in looking at the whole area of NGOs as well. So there's been across all institutes, we've seen this decline in trust. And the idea was, well, how do you build kind of trust again? And part of building trust within the charities sector is showing increased transparency, increased accountability, and, showing how the money was used. So again, we're using technology and the use of blockchain technology to kind of almost triage how the use of fund is. So say you're given €21 a month, and we see, how that money has been used by the entrepreneur. And what we're also doing is just intermediating the experience. So, it's all about the entrepreneur's interaction with the person who's supported them, which is kind of like the age-old sponsor a child thing. It's kind of sponsor a business. It's been one of the most successful parts of kind of fundraising, and there's this human connection. So that's one of the things in the first charity I was a volunteer in, Trush with Love, and there's a bunch of, kids in Russia that have this really great connection with people in Ireland, and that is sustained, 20 years on. So I think the other thing which entrepreneurs in Africa told us that they needed was they wanted more networks and more access to people who could put them in touch with people or who could advise them in certain areas. So again, this is where the mentoring component would come in. So volunteering is a big part of, you know, people's charitable, so it's time and money. And again, what we would use is the NFT there, the non-fungible token, to give attribution for your global giving, so being a global citizenship. So again, it's kind of building trust in a distributed way, you know, like people can be 3,000 miles away, but actually the kind of power of internet and connection actually brings, that activity in a really personalized sense. And it's building that kind of trust across geographies, you know, and that for me, I think is really important as a society. We kind of need those human connections now to sustain us as we see this kind of climate situation evolve, as we see the kind of geopoliticals being, you know, environment being very, how would you say, fragile and getting more fragile as we go on. So, I mean, Brené Brown, I don't know if you've come across Brené Brown, Christopher, but she's, I suppose, a behavioral scientist, and, you know, she's broken down the attributes of trust, you know, and she talks about braving it.
Okay.
And, you know, I think part of, I can brave down the braving, it means boundaryless, it means, you know, having, being a reliable person, it means being accountable, it means having integrity, it means being non-judgmental and thinking generously of people. Yeah. And I think this is where we need to do is use technology that kind of breaks down barriers, that actually realize, you know, entrepreneurs have so much in common with each other. It doesn't matter where you live in the world, your journey is pretty common. It's a bit more difficult in places like Africa, you know, versus say here in Ireland, where there are government supports for small businesses and realizing that potential. I mean, I think that what Nafasi is, the blockchain component of it is really just to say there's, first of all, we're doing it in a secure way. I'm not going to get into all the technical, but we're doing it in a secure way. We're doing it in a way which kind of it's immutable, so you can't kind of change the record. There's extra kind of security capacities to make sure that the triage is, you know, of the use of funds is equitable, is done with integrity. And it's also kind of, you know, putting a value on that human interaction and saying, actually, you know, using tokens as a force of strong human behavior, I think is kind of a good way to do things, you know. I think one of the things, and all of the research data is suggesting that, you know, blockchain is, because of its use case in cryptocurrency, has gone through a huge kind of reputational challenge. But equally, there are really great uses of blockchain. And I think we need to spend a little bit more time on the kind of positive aspects of blockchain and seeing that technology for good.
Okay, oh, that's absolutely fantastic, you know, Catrina. And I think, you know, I didn't quite catch the name of that person you mentioned regarding those philosophies you mentioned about trust.
Brené Brown.
If you could send me the link, I'd like to have that made available for people to look into. And when you look at those philosophies that you just mentioned, that person, I think that is what describes blockchain technology, how it should work with a trustless environment or ecosystem. But one thing I really liked what you just said was being able to use technology in a way to enable and empower individuals, especially entrepreneurs. And blockchain and cryptocurrencies are two separate things. When I was at London Stock Exchange, I looked at blockchain about 2015, 2016, and I thought, wow, this is absolutely phenomenal. The technology itself, I didn't quite like the cousin, as I call it, of which is cryptocurrencies, because a lot of ICOs were happening at a time and a lot of people were getting scammed. But if you just separate the two and look at all the empowering aspects of blockchain and what it can do for industry, then you're entering something that I feel was totally revolutionized everything around trust. Because in Africa, like you mentioned before, being able to have access to the networks, being able to have direct access to expertise and information, and without a intermediary, a third party blocking the way, especially with funds and all that stuff, creates a better way of working. And I definitely feel distributed ledger technology can do that. I just want to touch on that actually, because you mentioned the technology. You mentioned R3 Corda is what you initially used. Is that a platform that you want to continue with, or are you looking at?
Yeah, we're actually so Christopher and I were talking about the fact what we did was we built what we call it was a fairly agricultural kind of minimal viable product just to demonstrate the technology, and we used R3 Corda. We're now kind of moving to that production phase. So yeah, we're looking at various different choices of that. And I think, particularly we're really clear about, what we need to build. And there's almost like parts of the blockchain we want to use and parts of it we don't need at all. And I think, what's kind of interesting is, again, for the listeners, many of the various blockchain organizations that exist, some of them have used the coins for good. So they have set up foundations, and the idea was that they would do some charitable work around that. So, take a proportion of the community's coins and use it for a force for good. And I think because I suppose a lot of these funds have been challenged recently because of the kind of recent trends in terms of, the coin valuations and all of that it has impacted then on the funds available for, I suppose, blockchain native ideas that are beyond kind of coins and kind of cryptocurrency, et cetera, et cetera. So I suppose from where I'm sitting, I'm kind of really clear how I want to use blockchain, and it's about going through a systematic process to figure out what are the various protocols also that minimize the carbon footprint as well, because I think that's really important that we don't kind of have unnecessary use, and that has been a big criticism of blockchain. Like, I still feel we're in this kind of storming change of technology. When I was in Moby, where we were kind of at this, like the engineers in the organization, this is the year of the mobile web. This is the year of the mobile web. I mean, I don't think we're even in that phase of blockchain yet. I mean, for people that are listening that have no clue what blockchain is, or kind of have heard of this cryptocurrency thing, like, in a way, that kind of bedrock document of what cryptocurrencies could enable came as a result of the banking crisis.
Yeah, that's correct.
And because of a loss in trust, in the banking system, and how could these people who were kind of in charge of the system, not have done the right thing. And it kind of came from a really good place. And then I think we kind of got into the getting quick rich mode,
Yeah.
because initially when I was exposed to blockchain, and this is back in 2008, 2009, the engineer, as we know in software development, there's been this great whole, the open source software system, which has been a huge kind of human endeavor. What a great thing, like all of these entrepreneurs, coders sharing their code. And so there's great collaboration within the whole kind of software development area. And then, and I know some of those have ended up doing public offerings and all of that. So, again, there's a big debate around open source and how do we keep it, how do we keep the values of what, it was initially started for. So then with kind of cryptocurrencies, I feel like it kind of went through, oh my God, we can just make money. We can just kind of code money, and it was, I'm going to say boys generally, and it was like this kind of, wow, we can just software money. We can just software. And like, this is an incredible thing. You can just make money. You can just code money. And that's like 12 years ago, but it initially started out from to say, actually, you give to the community and you get tokens, but somehow it just went off the rails and suddenly it's okay, let's just make money out of code. And whether, I don't know what's going to happen to all of that, because my prediction is there will be digital currency, of course, but it will be regulated, in my view. What happens to those existing currencies that are out there in the interim, I don't know. Are they given a value? It's been a contribution to society or whatever else. Like, we know the advantages of kind of having a digital currency. It's accountable. It's, it moves quickly. It takes out exchange rate. All of these things. You can bank the unbanked. It's an opportunity, to kind of address inequality, equity, all of those things. So there are many kind of advantages of digital currency. So we're still in that norming, forming stage of it. And I think then, meanwhile, I know you had Genevieve Lavelle, we're kind of looking at, okay, well, in our case, she's looking at agriculture. How can we create that accountability, traceability, transparency, and making sure that actually everyone in the value chain gets a fair share?
Yes, absolutely.
Of that, how can we ensure food security? Like, these are kind of big macro issues that need to be dealt with. And I suppose that's where I'm kind of passionate around, wow, there is this great technology. Like, let's make sure and use it for the kind of big issues, because, we've seen with COVID, like, doesn't matter. Yes, if you're more well off, chances are, it's not going to be as difficult, but everyone was limited in travel. Everyone's life was limited, rich and poor there, So I do think if we can somehow engineer, that blockchain looks at these big issues, like, for example, even things like carbon auditing, there's about 1% of it audited. Whereas in my view, like, it's the thing we talk about so much. We're talking so much about climate change all the time. Like, if we're really serious about this ESG agenda, again, we would be looking at kind of a system of measurement in the input process, not a retrospective system, but in the input process. And look, there's a lot of innovation happening in this space. So we almost need, like, that kind of we need those kind of scalable solutions, like the Facebooks, the Googles, whatever, we need that kind of level of scalability of these kinds of ideas, I think, in the world going forward. And that's why I still feel we're in this storming phase of blockchain, and in a way, the cycle we're going through now will hopefully mean that we kind of get to that more kind of realistic human empowering, human additive processes to the use of the technology, including a digital currency as well.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of possibilities. I mean, you did highlight a bunch of them, with the carbon credits and CO2 certificates being awarded, and CO2 certificates is something that's it's going to be a big major part of the continent of Africa as well. Moving forward for the environment. But when you look at just going back to the technology and tokens and regulation, I did a workshop with Carmel Cadet on central bank digital currencies and the major part they're going to play. And I feel many central banks will bring that out within the next 18 months. And the regulation around that to make it legal tender, whether it's going to be wholesale or retail, is going to be a major factor in how we navigate this digital money. But being able to use the environment as a leading part of what we do, I think is more important. Yeah, it's more important because instead of just paying lip service to carbon zero, instead of just saying retrospectively, why can't we create solutions, like you said, at the forefront to enable that as an input rather than just the output of it? And I think blockchain technology can do that, and I would like to look into that a bit more on my journey with Crypto Coffee Club and being able to bring it out to the public as well. But I mean, I'd like to maybe touch on, you mentioned to me before we did this workshop that there's a lot of interest from your side to create this mentorship with entrepreneurs in Kenya. I mean, you just mentioned Kenya to me. I don't know how you're navigating the rest of the continent, and the fact that there's so much working people or young people that will be available to businesses. How do you see yourself in the sense of Nafasi being able to not just do Kenya, but to really scale? And what do you need to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea of building a digital first is exactly that. It is open to every entrepreneur on the continent of Africa. And that's, for me, is the power of digital. It's almost like you're pushing the power of the technology into both sides, so the supporter or the mentor and the entrepreneur. And really, the technology is the bit in the middle that, just does this kind of intelligent stuff of guiding it and curating it and measuring it and managing it in a way that, people can make sense of. So for me, if I look in Africa, so where the most, where you see kind of a lot of venture money going is like the big four, they call it. So you've got South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Egypt. And that's where something like 80% of the venture funding is going into Africa now. And when I started measuring this, there was about 725 million. So in 2018, of venturing money going into Africa. And I think this year, 2021 or 22 rather, it will be in excess of 4 to 5 billion. So there's been a massive explosion in investment in venturing in Africa. But when you kind of peel the onion, you start to kind of uncover a bunch of things. So the first thing is there's a massive amount in fintech. And that kind of concerns me. it's good in a way, but another thing concerns me is, because the home of fintech is Africa. For me,
Okay.
like a lot of the innovation of fintech has come out of Africa. So I'm just hoping it's not a lot of kind of crypto stuff, right? Because, where people are being taken advantage of, and it's, whatever token stuff that doesn't really add any value to anyone's life. Okay. Now, maybe I'm just being a pessimist on that. But the other thing, though, is that about 55% of the money is going to Indigenous entrepreneurs. But, so another 45% isn't going, to CEOs of African CEOs. And I suppose the other stat, which I suppose shouldn't surprise anyone, is the single-digit investment in female-led entrepreneurs. And I think anyone who spent time in Africa knows that women have an enormous ownership of micro and small businesses in Africa. They're kind of like power women, incredible. So those kind of stats, kind of concern me. And that's why, we need other methods of capital fundraising, and we don't need to be repeating the mistakes of, traditional venturing. I think venturing is a massive vehicle and needs to continue to grow. But, in terms of kind of scaling SMEs, there is such a massive gap, and it's going to get bigger. And that needs to be addressed. And I suppose this is where I'm saying is, if we can actually build that trust in a distributed way, that actually there's no limits on it. The fact I'm focused on Africa is more because I just see I have a passion about Africa. I've spent time there. I feel of all the continents in the world, it's the area that has such potential. And again, absolutely. Back to that demographics, we really need to deal with that demographic. It's in everyone's interest to do all of that. As a global citizen, we all need to realize that potential of Africa, because I feel as an Irish person, we have this affinity with Africa. I think we were colonized. We were kind of quite closed. We had quite a lot of influence via the Catholic Church and religion, organized religion. I feel that's happening in Africa as well. And, kind of we needed to kind of become a more open economy. We needed to reach out. We're a country of 5 million people. Africa is a continent of 1.3 billion people. There is huge activity going on, but it kind of now needs, to kind of unburden itself from a lot of things that kind of holds it back. And I think the young people are they've kind of given up on the older generations, because of corruption and all of those things. And you're kind of going, actually, it's going to be the young people that actually fix this world, that make it a better place. We need to give them the space and the opportunity to grow. And, when you spend some time like face to face with these entrepreneurs, they're just kind of so inspiring, a great business idea. It's such a huge domestic market in of itself. Not just, the export and the huge diaspora of Africans all over the world to serve as well. So they have a huge, in-market opportunity to be realized. And and I think, if Nafasi can play a small role, like our 5-year business plan is about creating what we call decent jobs. So, this idea that people, they are a part of the formal economy, it's kind of showing the way, because we know the formal economy and regularizing that is really important. But then it needs to move up the chain and say, okay, those kind of taxes that are realized now need to go back into education, into health, providing proper services, providing things that work. And I think we need big ideas that kind of go through with the vision rather than, you know, like I remember, you know, one kind of government health minister was saying, like, they had 53 different databases from different organizations that come in and help on, you know, developing a system, a health system. That isn't going to help anyone, you know. What kind of, you know, needs to step back is to say, we have a vision for our system. This is the system we want. Give us the funding towards the system and let's build a big system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, platforms. Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to cut you there, Katrina, but platforms are the way to go in the sense of, you know, I've looked into distributed ledger technology with digital assets, R3, we have Hedera, obviously Hyperledger, and a few of these different technologies there that you can interweave all the different systems and run seamlessly to be more efficient, more transparent. And I think there's a big need for that just to accelerate the growth of some of these organizations. But at the same time, if we have a platform that entrepreneurs can plug into without having to go through this bureaucratic, I don't know, in some of these countries, the bureaucracy and the corruption is just breathtaking, you know, just to do simple activities and have simple transparency when it comes to tender, when it comes down to having access to finance information. If they can plug into a platform that enables them to seamlessly have that access with other parts of the world, you know, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is the thing, you know, a lot of people are going through, you know, their whole work in a really truthful, honest, decent way. And then some aren't. But unfortunately, the some that aren't then actually puts the whole system under kind of review and distrust and all of those things. Whereas I suppose my thing is, if you codify trust, if you actually show, okay, here is the proof of how this, you know, so it doesn't matter if you're doing it honestly or if you're doing it if you're doing it dishonestly, it's going to show you up. If you're showing it honestly, it's actually going to build more trust, more benevolence, more positive energy around it. And I suppose this is, you know, so blockchain isn't just for, you know, kind of countries or continents that are experiencing like a lack of trust. It's kind of a human behavior we all need to do. We all need to think more generously of each other. We all need to support each other more. We all need to, you know, be brave in it on behalf of other people and be an advocate for other people and humanity and doing things right. You know, interestingly, Estonia as a government is an interesting example of a country that, you know, thinks digital first. Because again, like that, they said, look, nobody trusts each other here. We had the Stasi, you know, they came out of a very distrusted kind of environment, and they said, how can we build our nation post-communism? And again, they are probably the biggest kind of, how would you say, adopter of technology to deliver you know, things like health, education, whatever else to achieve that distributed trust. So, you know, the interesting thing for me is to think, well, actually, say I've my health records are on the blockchain, and the idea is that, you know, I would see who's looking at my records, data from the kind of, you know, health administration of the country. But equally, I would have access to my records as well. And I think that kind of builds trust, you know, the fact. And suddenly you have a fuller data set and a full view of, you know, the kind of history. And let's think about all of the kind of paper processes that have been taken out. And everyone just kind of adds into the system, and they get to see it's a permission data, it's secure, it's exchanged in a way that has integrity. So it's as much about people making people's jobs more enjoyable. And I think this is the big thing about technology is, like, if you automate those kind of processes, it means then you have more time for the human processes, so, you can spend time on the person who's more vulnerable, who maybe can't use this digital thing. And it means then that you can redeploy, staff members or administration or whatever else to actually helping this person in a face-to-face way. Maybe they need a visit, maybe they need a home visit because they're sick and have those needs as well. So I think, we are operating with scarce resources, and, throwing more money at everything we know doesn't actually right things at all. You have to kind of really think through around the kind of patient experience. In the case of Nafasi, it's thinking through the entrepreneur experience, thinking of the mentor experience, thinking about, like, how does this kind of impact people in a most humane way? And I think that, for me, is if you design things in that way, and then you measure it to say, look, is this a positive experience or not? And, what do we need to change here? I think that, to me, is that human-centered design. And kind of back to my days in retail, or, creating different foods and products or whatever else, you were continually talking to the customer about the feedback. And, what did they like, what they didn't like. And, the researcher almost says to me, we don't need to make these complicated. We just need to kind of speak to the stakeholders and get their input and kind of act on it.
Absolutely. And, some of the rhetoric I hear in some areas. I went to R3Core.com. It was a big event they had. And the challenge some of these evangelists or individuals who are looking to push this technology to create a better human experience, they're getting a pushback because it is a lot of organizations or institutions are so ingrained in the old way of doing things that they don't fully, they think it's too risky to embrace this new way of thinking, a new technology or way of coding trust into everything. Because I think certain economies are based on not being transparent, not being trustworthy, and there's an economy within that gray area that they want to keep. And especially in Africa, where trust has been eroded generation after generation by poor governance and no transparency, I think there is a big opportunity there, but it's just having enough courage and wherewithal to bring that to the fore. Yeah. And I think Nafasi are really on the right track. I don't know what other company is doing exactly what you're doing, based on your research, but I definitely feel that you're on the right track, from my personal opinion, through your philosophy. But it's just getting to that point where you're impacting in a big way.
Yeah, I think there are a huge amount of, really, I would say, they're kind of grassroots applications of blockchain that are really positive. But I do think, this is kind of a great forum to start discussing, like, some of those opportunities, which I think, Christopher, you've been really championing. So I kind of really appreciate that, because this is the good news story of blockchain. I mean, what we need to do now is use that influence, to try and get, all this money that's kind of there and focused on these, at government level, at, the international financial institutes level, at the multilateral level. Most of the organizations like World Bank, EU, they all have there's an African blockchain movement. So everyone has kind of blockchain movements there. And I think everyone's moving in that direction. And, they kind of have to make a choice around, okay, what are the things do we prioritize here? Because there's always kind of scarce resources there. And I think the SDG goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals, I almost feel they're like, kind of almost like a strategic plan for the planet. I don't know, and so actually it was a Kenyan guy and an Irish guy who, kind of were the rapporteurs on those 17 goals. And they kind of inform my life, a lot around the country. And, it talks about, having clean water, education, digital inclusion, caring for our oceans, the climate obviously is in there, caring for our earth. So it's kind of like a scorecard, and like my son is really interested in the kind of whole stratosphere, and he often shows me like a picture of the earth. I mean, we're seriously like a little speck, this kind of blue marble speck. And even though, we're approaching 8 billion people, but in a way, we kind of need to get on the one agenda, like all of these parochial, horrible wars and fighting. And there's such a distraction, we're like this little kind of little marble in the middle of the universe. And, if we kind of think about that and, like how we actually survive, but then, how do we thrive and how do we make everyone thrive? We're here for a short time.
Yeah.
And okay, maybe in this existing form, whatever your beliefs are, it doesn't matter. But, it is this kind of whole sense of like, let's kind of use the Sustainable Development Goals to kind of inform us, and let's take each one of those and say, okay, what's the big blockchain idea? Or what is the technology that kind of can drive this away in a coherent way that creates the outputs and outcomes and the measurements to achieve that? I think would be great. And the more people kind of come together in that, a government comes together, I think is really important. But I'm still kind of optimistic for this. I think as a parent, particularly areas like climate change, we're probably the first generation that really have had the data to understand actually what's going on. And, and maybe, as you say, it's kind of hard to push off the old ways of doing things. And therefore, like I say to my kids, you guys are the ones that's going to be the engineers, the scientists, the business people of the future that are going to be fixing these things. And I think if people that are, slightly older, that have had this exposure to technology, can actually kind of, and have the capacity, to actually, make decisions around putting money, putting effort, putting time to actually using technology to address these big core issues in society. I think, we have a positive trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just gave some individual listening to this some really good ideas. And I will definitely look at the SDGs and in more detail and how you can align yourself with those in the best way. I think the environment first is definitely, and people first is definitely the way to go. And I think, I'm from a technology background, Katrina, and I've been in the weeds. I've looked at code and looked at architectural designs and all that stuff, and a part of me was saying, this is soulless. This is not really. What's the outcome of all this? To make a company more money, or am I doing something for the greater good? Am I really impacting people? And this is one of the reasons why I started Crypto Coffee Club. I wanted to share some little nuggets of my knowledge, but at the same time leverage the whole community to give more to the world, you know. And when I get this edited and on YouTube and out onto LinkedIn, I want to challenge a lot of these CEOs or founders to really share what their vision is and what impact they're going to have for people with their technology and their ideas. You know, because that's what blockchain technology is. Cryptocurrencies has, say, muddied the waters a little bit, but the token economy is what's going to drive a lot of innovation and a lot of change. And I just want to just finish on this note as well before I hand back to you. You mentioned 2008 and 2009, the financial meltdown we had, and that's where Bitcoin white paper came out. The Bitcoin white paper. We're facing the same situation right now, but 3 or 4 times bigger than anyone could imagine. We're looking at Credit Suisse, Deutsche, and some other major institutions with serious liquidity issues and debt, and they're on a brink of collapse. And this is going to happen and play out over the next few weeks and months. And what's going to come out of that is blockchain and tokenization being the way a lot of these institutions are going to go to. And it's a great opportunity for any entrepreneurs here watching this and listening to this to say, how can I make this better? We haven't really learned from 2008. We're going into a situation right now where inflation is super high, and we're printing more money than we've done before. We're taking on more debt in the UK that we've ever taken on before, just to keep the lights on. So that's something to really think about, and how we can use blockchain technology to help. But what I want to do is hand over to you, Catrina, just to conclude.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the kind of financial outlook, certainly in the medium term, looks challenging for sure. And, you know, it's kind of interesting. There was Blockchain Week here in Ireland a number of months ago. And, you know, there was a banker in the room who, you know, in fairness, was kind of talking about its organization's evolution and all of that. And, you know, there was government bodies in the room. And then there was kind of your kind of native crypto developers and all of that. And there was one memorable thing where, you know, this young gentleman said, you know, he said, like, my family lost everything in the 2009 crash. They lost everything, a generational business. You know, and he's saying, why should I believe you? Why should I believe you? I think, you know, we're here, I suppose, where as a society, you know, if you're a big business, you have all these financial instruments with zero risk to you, you know, like zero risk. If you have to write off or whatever else, and, you know, nobody goes to jail, nothing, right? And then meanwhile, if you're an entrepreneur, you lose your life. You lose your life. You know, you've got to rebuild yourself. You've got to literally pick yourself up by those laces on your boots again and start again. So, like, we continue to make these mistakes. You know, the only thing I would say this time is that we've kind of had 10 years, you know, 10, 11, 12 years. We've had COVID. I think we have ESG, you know, and whether it's greenwashing or not, I firmly believe, from what I've seen, the response to COVID, what that has done to us as a society, what ESG is bringing, you know, albeit it might be surface stuff right now, but I see a consciousness in the business world, I'm going to say, that I haven't seen before. I've had my foot in both camps, and now maybe it's the optimistic in me wants to see that. So, if we go through a second cycle now, I think what we have to be optimistic about is to say, you know what, there's kind of a bunch of ideas here. There's, the wherewithal technology wise, we can do this. We came up with a vaccine in, great timing. We had, so there's a bunch of things that makes me more optimistic. And, we have to be optimistic, because if we don't and have hope, and even though there might be this kind of short-term, Armageddon all over again, I think we have to say, okay, let's hope that those in charge, let's hope that those businesses, those leaders have an opportunity to say, okay, it's not in anyone's interest for this to happen all over again.
Yeah.
And be optimistic about it. So I think it is beholden on to us to continue to work hard, and again, things you're doing, we're all making our small contribution to getting this tech for good story out. There are unintended consequences of technology. And I just think, having a mature approach, an open approach, to actually investing time and money into real things that add value to people's lives in a real way, I think, is kind of I suppose, something that we all have to hope for.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Catrina. What I'll do, we have one guest on here, or attendee, Juliet. Also because of the timing of this workshop, and I don't know if Juliet wants to unmute herself. If she's there, just to maybe ask any questions and maybe shed some light. Hi, Juliet.
Hi there. Hi, Chris. Hello. Thank you very much for that presentation. That was really interesting listening. I was just about to try and find a way to put a note, because I had to go onto my mobile phone to say I actually have to leave right now.
Okay.
My the ride, shall I call it, has arrived. So thank you. I don't have any questions, and I'm going to review the recording as well. So I'm looking forward to that again. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Juliet.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So yeah, I think to be honest, Catrina, you've unpacked so much, and it's been very interesting listening to your journey, but at the same time, you've hit on certain aspects of business that I haven't heard before. I just definitely haven't heard leaders really express how they view this technology and the macro impact it's going to have. Maybe I think obviously Genevieve did with the supply chain, and I think Carmel did with central banks, and transforming that to help the greater good for financial inclusion. But what you've brought to the table, I feel, is being able to challenge people's thinking around the environment, and challenge people's heart when it comes to what tangible impact you're making with this technology. And I think that's a very, very important aspect to consider. But what I like to do, I'll conclude at the moment. I'll switch off the record, and then we can have a little chat afterwards. But thank you, Catrina, and I really look forward to meeting you in person. I know you're flying off to
GTEx in Dubai.
Yeah, Dubai. Yeah, I don't know if you've been there before.
No, haven't been at the GTEx conference. Which is a big technology conference for people that are listening. So it'd be
fantastic to see how you enjoy that. But I'll just stop here. So let me stop.